I stood in front of 30 pairs of eyes that once looked at me with respect and admiration, and all I saw now was disgust, whispers, judgment, fear. The kind of fear parents teach their children when they want them to stay away from someone dangerous, someone dirty, someone guilty. And the worst part? I hadn't done a single thing wrong. But when money talks and reputations scream louder than truth, innocence becomes irrelevant. My name is Clara Meneses, and this is the story of how I was destroyed by a lie so calculated, so vicious, so perfectly crafted that even I started questioning my own memory. But it's also the story of how I clawed my way back from hell and made sure everyone who buried me alive choked on the dirt they threw on my grave. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. The kind of morning where sunlight streams through classroom windows and everything feels possible. I'd been teaching English literature at Riverside Academy for 7 years. 7 years of arriving early, staying late, spending my own money on classroom supplies, tutoring students for free after school, organizing reading clubs, and genuinely believing that education could change lives.
I wasn't just good at my job.
I was exceptional. My students consistently scored highest in district assessments. Parents requested me specifically. Former students came back years later to thank me for pushing them, believing in them, refusing to let them settle for mediocre. I loved teaching with a passion that consumed me completely. It wasn't just a career. It was my purpose, my identity, the thing that made me wake up excited every single morning. That Tuesday, I was reviewing essays when my classroom door opened and Principal Hartley walked in with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, more like uncomfortable, nervous. The kind of face people make when they have to deliver terrible news and don't know how. Behind him stood two people I recognized immediately, Robert and Catherine Blackwood, parents of one of my students, Ethan Blackwood, a 16-year-old junior who'd been in my advanced literature class for 3 months. The Blackwoods weren't just wealthy. They were Riverside royalty. Robert owned half the commercial real estate in town. Catherine sat on every charity board that mattered. Their name was on the new gymnasium, the library wing, even the scholarships that sent low-income students to college. They had power, influence, and they knew exactly how to use it. Principal Hartley cleared his throat, not quite meeting my eyes. "Miss Meneses, we need to speak with you in my office immediately." Something about his tone made my stomach drop. This wasn't a casual conversation. This was official, serious, dangerous. I followed them through hallways that suddenly felt longer, narrower, suffocating. Students stared as we passed. Teachers whispered behind hands. Everyone could sense something was wrong. The kind of wrong that spreads like wildfire through a school building before anyone even knows what happened. When we reached the principal's office, there were already 2 other people waiting. A woman I didn't recognize holding a briefcase and a man in a police uniform. My heart started racing. Police? Why would police be at a parent meeting? "Please sit down, Clara," Principal Hartley said, and the use of my first name felt wrong. He always called me Miss Meneses in professional settings. This informality was deliberate. A signal. I sat down in a chair that felt too small, too exposed, while everyone else remained standing. Catherine Blackwood spoke first, her voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed emotion. "Miss Meneses, I never thought I'd have to do this. Never in my worst nightmares did I imagine that someone we trusted with our son's education would violate that trust in such a horrific way." I blinked, completely lost. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood, but I have no idea what you're talking about." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play innocent. Ethan told us everything. How you've been sending him inappropriate messages. How you've made comments about his appearance. How you asked him to stay after class alone multiple times. How you've been grooming him for months." The room tilted. Actually tilted like the floor had turned to liquid beneath my feet. I heard the words she was saying, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Because none of that had ever happened. Not a single word. Not a single moment. Not even a fraction of what she was describing had ever occurred. "That's not true," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "That's absolutely not true." I have never, ever done anything inappropriate with Ethan or any student. This is insane. This is. Robert Blackwood cut me off, his voice cold and precise like a scalpel. We have evidence. Screenshots of text messages, emails, testimonies from other students who witnessed your behavior. Our lawyer has compiled everything into a formal complaint. We're not here to debate whether it happened. We're here to inform you that we're taking action. I looked at Principal Hartley, desperately hoping he'd defend me.
Say something.
Anything. We'd worked together for 7 years. He knew me, knew my character, knew I'd never do something like this. But he just stood there, face pale, hands clasped in front of him like he was at a funeral. My funeral? There must be some mistake, I said, voice rising with panic. I don't even have Ethan's phone number. I've never texted him. I communicate with students only through the official school email system, and every message is documented. Someone is lying. Someone is making this up. Catherine's face twisted into something ugly. Are you calling my son a liar? Are you suggesting that a 16-year-old boy would fabricate such serious allegations for fun? The woman with the briefcase, who I now realized must be their lawyer, stepped forward. Miss Menezes, my clients are prepared to file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit unless the school takes immediate and decisive action. We're talking about sexual harassment of a minor, abuse of authority, psychological manipulation. These are not light accusations. The police officer finally spoke. Miss Menezes, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. Everything was happening too fast, too wrong, too impossible. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I'd done nothing. Nothing. And yet I was being treated like a predator. Like a monster. Like my entire life's work meant nothing because one wealthy family decided to destroy me. I want a lawyer, I managed to say, proud that my voice didn't shake even though my entire body was trembling. I'm not answering any questions without legal representation. Robert Blackwood smiled. Actually smiled. And it was the coldest, most calculated expression I'd ever seen. Smart move, Miss Menezes. You're going to need a very good lawyer. Because by the time we're done, you'll never teach again. Not here. Not anywhere. We're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Principal Hartley finally found his voice, though it was weak and pathetic. Clara, I'm going to have to place you on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation. I'm sorry, but with allegations as serious, I have no choice. You need to collect your personal belongings and leave campus immediately. Security will escort you. Escorted off campus. Like a criminal. Like someone dangerous who couldn't be trusted around children. I stood up, legs shaking but somehow holding me upright. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. And I'm going to prove it. Catherine Blackwood's voice followed me to the door. You can try, but money and influence will always beat the word of a teacher nobody cares about. Welcome to reality, Miss Menezes. The walk from the principal's office to my classroom felt like a death march. Security Officer Rodriguez, who usually smiled and chatted with me about his daughter, who wanted to be a writer, now walked 3 steps behind me in complete silence. Students and teachers lined the hallways, all staring, all whispering, all watching the scandal unfold in real time. I could see the questions in their eyes, the doubt, the judgment, the immediate assumption that where there's smoke, there must be fire. By the time I reached my classroom, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely pack my things. Books I'd bought with my own money. Posters I'd carefully chosen to inspire students. Personal photographs of me at literary conferences, me receiving teaching awards, me with former students who'd gone on to do amazing things. I shoved everything into boxes while Rodriguez stood at the door like I might suddenly become violent or try to destroy evidence. Evidence that didn't exist. Of crimes I'd never committed. As I carried the last box out to my car, I saw him, Ethan Blackwood, standing by the main entrance with a group of friends, watching me leave. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Not trauma, not fear, not the haunted look of a victim. I saw satisfaction, triumph. a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth that he didn't quite hide fast enough. And in that split second, I understood. This wasn't about me doing something wrong. This was about me refusing to do something he wanted. 2 weeks earlier, Ethan had submitted an essay that was clearly plagiarized. I'd given him a failing grade and reported it to administration per school policy. He'd argued, gotten defensive, said I was being unfair, said his parents would hear about this. And I'd stood firm because that was my job, to maintain academic integrity, to teach students that actions have consequences. That privilege doesn't exempt you from rules. I'd thought he'd gotten over it, moved on, but I'd been wrong, so catastrophically wrong. The next 48 hours were a nightmare that felt like it lasted years. The story hit local news immediately because the Blackwoods made sure it did. Teacher accused of sexual misconduct with student screamed across every headline. My name, my photo, my entire life reduced to this one false accusation. My phone exploded with messages. Some from friends who couldn't believe it. Many from acquaintances who absolutely could. The worst ones were from former students saying they always knew something was off about me. People I'd helped. People I'd believed in. People who now rewrote history to align with the narrative that I was a predator who'd fooled everyone for years. Social media was even worse. Someone created a page called Justice for Ethan Blackwood that went viral within hours. Strangers who'd never met me, never been in my classroom, never spoken a single word to me in their entire lives were calling for my arrest. My execution. Saying I deserved to rot in prison. That teachers like me were the reason parents couldn't trust anyone. I hired a lawyer named David Chen who came highly recommended despite his fees being absolutely devastating to my savings. He reviewed the evidence the Blackwoods had submitted, and his face grew darker with each page. Clara, I'm not going to lie to you. This looks bad. Really bad. They have screenshots of text messages allegedly from your phone number. They have emails supposedly from your school account. They have 3 students who claim they witnessed you making inappropriate comments to Ethan. And they have Ethan's own detailed testimony about months of escalating behavior. I felt like I was drowning. But none of that happened. None of it. Those messages aren't from me. Those emails aren't from me. Those students are lying. All of it is fabricated. David looked at me with the kind of skepticism lawyers develop after years of clients swearing they're innocent.
Can you prove that?
Can you prove those messages are fake? Can you explain why 3 students would all lie? Can you provide an alternative explanation for everything they're claiming? And that's when I realized the true genius of what the Blackwoods had done. They hadn't just accused me. They'd built an entire case. A narrative so detailed and so consistent that denying it made me look like I was just covering up guilt. They'd thought of everything, anticipated every defense, closed every loophole. This wasn't a reckless accusation made in anger. This was a calculated destruction executed with precision and resources I couldn't match. I'm a teacher, I whispered. I make $48,000 a year. They're millionaires. How am I supposed to fight this? David sighed. That's the question nobody wants to answer. Because in this system, money doesn't just talk. It writes the entire script. And people like the Blackwoods know exactly how to use it. The school board meeting happened 2 weeks later. It was supposed to be a closed session, but somehow the media found out and cameras lined the entrance. I walked through a crowd of protesters holding signs that said, "Protect our children" and "No predators in schools" and "Justice for Ethan."
People spat at me.
Actually spat. Called me vile names. One woman screamed that I should kill myself before they did it for me. Inside the boardroom, the Blackwoods sat on one side with their lawyer and their perfectly coached son. I sat on the other side with David, feeling small and exposed and guilty, even though I'd done nothing wrong. Because that's what false accusations do. They make you question your own reality. Make you wonder if somehow, some way, you did something you don't remember. If you're the crazy one. If everyone else can see something you can't. Principal Hartley presented his findings. The school's investigation, he said, had uncovered a pattern of concerning behavior. Multiple students reported that I often asked Ethan to stay after class. that I gave him special attention, that I seemed overly interested in his personal life. All of which was true, but completely innocent. Ethan struggled with reading comprehension, and I'd been giving him extra help. He'd asked me for advice about college applications because his parents had unrealistic expectations, and he was stressed. I'd been doing my job, being a good teacher, providing support to a student who needed it. But they'd taken every normal, appropriate interaction and twisted it into something sinister. Principal Hartley continued, voice heavy with false regret. Additionally, we've confirmed that the text messages and emails in question did originate from Miss Menezes' phone number and school email account. My heart stopped. That's impossible. I never sent those messages. The board chair, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson who'd always been cold toward me, leaned forward. Miss Menezes, are you suggesting that someone else accessed her phone and email account to send these messages? It sounded absurd even as I said it.
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Someone framed me. Catherine Blackwood made us sound like a wounded animal. This is unbelievable.
She's not just denying what she did.
She's creating conspiracy theories to avoid responsibility. Our son is traumatized. He's seeing a therapist 3 times a week. He can barely sleep. And she's sitting here claiming she's the victim? Robert Blackwood stood up, commanding the room with the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of being obeyed. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my family has supported this school for 2 decades. We've donated millions of dollars. We've volunteered countless hours. We've sent our children here because we believed in Riverside Academy's values and integrity. But if you don't take decisive action against this woman, if you allow her to continue teaching, if you send the message that protecting predators is more important than protecting students, then we will have no choice but to withdraw our support entirely. The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Mrs. Patterson and the other board members exchanged glances. I could see them calculating, weighing my career against the Blackwoods' money, my truth against their power. And I already knew what they'd choose. Because in situations like this, justice is a luxury only the rich can afford. Miss Menezes, Mrs. Patterson said slowly, in light of the evidence presented and the serious nature of these allegations, the board has voted to terminate your employment effective immediately. Additionally, we will be reporting this matter to the state licensing board and recommending that your teaching license be permanently revoked. The room spun. My career was over. Not just at Riverside Academy, but everywhere. Forever. Because once you're accused of something like this, it doesn't matter if you're innocent. It doesn't matter if you prove it was all lies. The stain never washes out. The whispers never stop. You become the teacher nobody will hire because why take the risk? I stood up, chair scraping against floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. You're making a mistake. All of you. You're letting them destroy an innocent person because you're too afraid to stand up to money and power. But the truth will come out. Somehow, some way, I will prove what really happened. And when I do, every single person in this room will have to live with the fact that you chose corruption over justice. I walked out before they could see me cry, before they could see me break. Because if I gave them that satisfaction, if I showed them they'd won, I'd never be able to put myself back together. The news of my termination spread faster than the original accusation. I became a pariah overnight. Friends stopped answering my calls. My landlord asked me to move out because other tenants were uncomfortable. The grocery store I'd shopped at for 7 years asked me not to return. Someone spray-painted "Predator" across my car. My social media accounts were flooded with death threats so violent and so specific that I had to delete everything and go completely offline. I spent the next 3 weeks in a fog of depression, so thick I could barely breathe. I didn't leave my apartment, didn't shower, didn't eat, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling wondering how my entire life had been destroyed so completely and so quickly. Wondering if fighting was even worth it when the system was designed to protect people like the Blackwoods and crush people like me. David called every few days with updates. All of them bad. The district attorney was considering criminal charges. The licensing board had opened an investigation. Several news outlets wanted interviews where I could tell my side, but David warned that anything I said publicly could be used against me later. I was trapped, silenced, erased. Exactly what they wanted. But on the 24th day after my termination, something inside me shifted. I was scrolling through old photos on my laptop, looking at pictures from better times, when I came across a folder labeled Ethan Blackwood Fall Semester. It was standard protocol. I kept digital files on every student, including attendance records, assignment submissions, grade history, and any parent communications. I opened it without any real expectations, but what I found made my breath catch. Every email exchange I'd had with Ethan. Every assignment he'd submitted. Complete records showing exactly when and how we'd communicated. And none of the supposed inappropriate messages were there. Not a single one. Which meant someone had created fake messages and somehow made them appear to come from my accounts without actually sending them through the school system. That took technical knowledge, planning, resources. This wasn't something Ethan could have done alone. Someone had helped him. Someone with money and motivation and access to technology that could forge digital communications. I opened my email account and checked the settings. My password had been changed 3 weeks before the accusation started. I'd thought it was just the school's security update, but now I looked more carefully. The change had been made from an IP address that wasn't mine. Someone else had accessed my account, changed my password, and had 3 weeks to create whatever false evidence they wanted. My hands started shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from rage.
Pure, burning, clarifying rage.
They'd tried to destroy me. They'd almost succeeded, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated how stubborn I could be when someone tried to take away the thing I loved most. I called David immediately. I need you to hire a digital forensics expert. Someone who can trace IP addresses and analyze digital communications. I found something. Something that might prove the messages were fabricated. For the first time since this nightmare began, his voice had hope in it. Clara, if you can prove those messages are fake, this whole case falls apart. Everything depends on that evidence. Without it, they have nothing but accusations. Send me what you found. I spent the next week documenting everything. Every inconsistency. Every timeline discrepancy. Every piece of evidence that didn't align with their story. The forensics expert David hired was a woman named Dr. Sarah Lynn, who specialized in cybercrimes and digital fraud. She examined my accounts, traced the IP addresses, analyzed the metadata on the alleged messages, and after 5 days of intensive investigation, she delivered her report. These messages are definitively fake, Dr. Lin said, her tone absolutely certain. Whoever created them used sophisticated software to generate texts that appeared to come from your phone number, but never actually went through your carrier. They also accessed your school email account from a location that analysis shows was inside the Blackwood residence. Furthermore, the timestamps on several messages place them at times when your phone records show you were in completely different locations. You were at a teacher's conference 3 hours away when one supposedly explicit text was sent. You were at a dentist appointment during another. Your phone's GPS data proves you couldn't have sent these messages. It wasn't just vindication. It was a weapon. David called the Blackwoods' lawyer immediately to inform them we had evidence proving the allegations were fabricated. The response was swift and brutal. Within hours, Robert Blackwood's legal team filed a motion claiming we'd illegally hacked into their home network to plant false evidence. Catherine Blackwood went on local news crying about how I was continuing to victimize their son by refusing to accept responsibility. The media ate it up. The narrative shifted from teacher accused of abuse to teacher continues to harass innocent family even after termination. I was losing. Still losing, even with proof, even with evidence, because they had something more powerful than truth. They had control over the story people wanted to believe. But I'd spent 7 years teaching literature, teaching students to analyze narratives, to look for inconsistencies, to question unreliable narrators. And I realized something crucial about the Blackwood story. It was too perfect, too detailed, too consistent. Real trauma survivors often have gaps in their memory, confusion about timelines, contradictory emotions. But Ethan's testimony read like a screenplay. Every event perfectly remembered. Every conversation exactly recalled. Every emotion precisely described. It was fiction. Well-written fiction, but fiction nonetheless. And if I could prove that Ethan's story was coached and rehearsed rather than genuinely experienced, I could dismantle their entire case. I needed to talk to the other students. The three who'd supposedly witnessed my inappropriate behavior. David warned me against it, said it could be seen as witness intimidation. But I didn't care anymore about playing by rules that were designed to protect my accusers rather than find the truth. I started with Jessica Morrison, a junior who'd been in my class the previous year. She'd given a statement claiming she'd seen me touch Ethan's shoulder in a way that seemed wrong. I found her after school at the coffee shop where she worked part-time. She looked terrified when she saw me walk in. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered. The fact that she thought I was capable of violence broke something inside me. "Jessica, I'm not here to threaten you. I just want to understand why you said what you said. Why you testified that I acted inappropriately with Ethan when you know that's not true." She started crying immediately. Mrs. Blackwood came to my house. She told my mom that if I didn't make a statement supporting Ethan, they'd make sure I didn't get into any good colleges. My mom's a single parent. We can't afford private college counselors or test prep. Mrs. Blackwood said she'd blacklist me from every scholarship program they controlled. What was I supposed to do? So Catherine Blackwood hadn't just framed me. She'd coerced children into lying for her, threatened their futures to protect her son's lies. I recorded Jessica's confession on my phone with her permission. Then I found the other two student witnesses. Connor Hayes admitted the Blackwoods had paid his family's mortgage for 3 months in exchange for a statement. Emma Torres said they'd promised her a recommendation letter for a prestigious summer program. None of them had actually witnessed anything inappropriate. They'd all been bribed or threatened into creating false testimony. With these confessions, Dr. Lynn's forensics report, and my own documentation of Ethan's plagiarism that had triggered this entire nightmare, I finally had enough to fight back. But I needed something more. Something explosive. Something that would force people to pay attention. And then I remembered something Ethan had said during the board meeting. He'd claimed I'd sent him inappropriate messages late at night. But the night he'd specifically mentioned, September 15th, I'd been at my sister's wedding 400 miles away. I had hundreds of photos proving it. Time-stamped pictures with GPS coordinates. Videos of me giving a speech at the reception. Witnesses who could confirm I'd been there all night. Ethan hadn't just lied. He'd made a specific, provable, impossibly stupid lie. David filed an emergency motion to reopen the case based on new evidence. The school board tried to deny it, but when local news caught wind of potential false accusations and coerced witnesses, public pressure forced them to agree to a hearing. This time it wouldn't be closed. This time cameras would be allowed. This time the whole world would see exactly what the Blackwoods had done. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept running through everything in my mind. Every piece of evidence. Every witness statement. Every moment of the past 2 months that had nearly destroyed me. I thought about giving up at least 100 times. Walking away. Starting over somewhere else with a new name and a new life where nobody knew what had happened. But then I remembered every student I'd ever taught. Every kid who'd struggled with confidence or self-worth or believing they could be more than what others expected. I told them to fight for themselves. To stand up for truth even when it was hard. To never let anyone silence them. How could I tell future students any of that if I couldn't do it myself? The hearing room was packed. Media. Community members. Teachers from Riverside Academy who'd stayed silent during my persecution, but now wanted to see how this ended. And, of course, the Blackwoods. Robert in his expensive suit looking calm and confident. Catherine with her perfectly styled hair and practiced expressions. And Ethan, sitting between them, looking younger and more nervous than I'd ever seen him. David stood up first. He laid out our evidence methodically and devastatingly. The forensics report showing fabricated messages. The GPS data proving I couldn't have sent texts from locations Ethan claimed. The confessions from coerced student witnesses. The The phone records demonstrating someone had illegally accessed my accounts from the Blackwood residence. Each revelation hit the room like an explosion. I watched the board members' faces change from skeptical to shocked to horrified. I watched reporters frantically typing. I watched community members whispering to each other, confusion and anger spreading through the crowd. And I watched the Blackwoods' confidence slowly crumble. Catherine tried to maintain composure, but her mask was cracking. This is ridiculous. She's fabricated all of this to save her career. Our son is telling the truth. David smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Then perhaps Ethan would like to explain how Miss Menezes sent him inappropriate messages on September 15th when she was 400 miles away at her sister's wedding. Or how messages supposedly from her phone never actually went through her cellular carrier. Or how his testimony contains details that are word-for-word identical to coaching documents we found on his mother's computer. Robert Blackwood stood up, face red with rage. "How dare you accuse us of?" But David cut him off. "I'm not accusing you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm presenting evidence. Evidence that your family systematically framed an innocent teacher because your son was upset about receiving a failing grade for academic dishonesty. Evidence that you used your wealth and influence to coerce children into lying. Evidence that you committed fraud, witness tampering, and defamation. Those aren't accusations. Those are facts." The room exploded. Board members demanding answers. Media shouting questions. Community members turning on the Blackwoods with the same fury they'd directed at me weeks earlier. Because nothing enrages people more than realizing they've been manipulated into attacking an innocent person. Mrs. Patterson banged her gavel trying to restore order, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. The truth was finally being heard. But I wasn't done. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. Everyone went quiet. I'd like to say something. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Because I wasn't the broken woman they'd tried to create. I was a teacher who'd survived hell and come back stronger. For 2 months, I've been called a predator, a monster, a threat to children. I've received death threats. I've lost my career. I've lost my reputation. I've lost everything I spent my entire adult life building.
And why?
Because I gave a student a failing grade for cheating. Because I refused to compromise my integrity to protect a privileged teenager from consequences. I turned to face the Blackwoods directly. You could have come to me. You could have met with Principal Hartley. You could have had a conversation about academic policies and grading standards. Instead, you decided to destroy me. You decided that your son's feelings mattered more than my life. That your family's reputation was worth more than my truth. You weaponized the very real trauma of actual abuse survivors to cover up your son's academic dishonesty. And you did it without a second thought because you've never had to face real consequences for anything in your entire privileged lives. Catherine's face went white. Robert looked like he wanted to strangle me. But they couldn't. Not here.
Not now.
Not with evidence and witnesses and cameras capturing every moment. Ethan was crying, actually sobbing. And for the first time, I felt something close to sympathy for him. He was 16, immature,
Spoiled.
but he was also a kid whose parents had taught him that lies and manipulation were acceptable tools for avoiding accountability. He'd learned those lessons from somewhere. "I don't want revenge," I continued. "I want justice. I want my job back. I want my license restored. I want a public apology from every person who condemned me without evidence. I want the Blackwoods charged with the crimes they committed. And I want reforms in this school district so that no teacher ever has to go through what I went through because they dared to hold a wealthy student accountable." The board deliberated for 30 minutes. When they returned, Mrs. Patterson looked like she'd aged 10 years. "Miss Menezes, on behalf of Riverside Academy and this board, I offer our sincerest apologies. The evidence presented today conclusively demonstrates that you were the victim of a malicious and coordinated campaign to destroy your career and reputation. Your termination is hereby reversed. Your teaching license will be immediately restored, and we will be referring this matter to law enforcement for criminal investigation." The room erupted in applause. Teachers were crying. Community members were cheering. Media was documenting the vindication of a teacher who'd refused to stay silent. But the real twist came 3 days later. The police arrested Catherine Blackwood for fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy. Robert was charged as an accessory. Ethan, being a minor, was referred to juvenile court, but his confession statement was publicly released. In it, he admitted everything. How his mother had orchestrated the entire plan. How she'd paid for sophisticated software to create fake messages. How she'd coached him on exactly what to say. How she'd threatened and bribed other students. How his father had used business connections to pressure the school board. It was all there. Every ugly detail of how far they'd been willing to go to protect their son from failing a class. The community reaction was swift and brutal. The Blackwoods were ostracized. Their businesses suffered. Donations they'd made were returned by organizations that didn't want to be associated with their name. Catherine's charity board positions were rescinded. Robert lost clients. They'd built an empire on their reputation, and that reputation was now ash. The school board offered me more than my job back. They offered me a promotion. Head of the English department with a significant salary increase. An official commendation. And a guarantee that any future allegations against teachers would be investigated thoroughly before any action was taken. I accepted. Not because I forgave them for what they'd put me through, but because I'd fought too hard to reclaim my career to walk away from it now. My first day back at Riverside Academy was surreal. Teachers who'd avoided me now greeted me warmly. Students who'd whispered about me now asked for my autograph. I'd become a symbol. The teacher who fought the system and won. The woman who proved that truth could beat money if you refused to give up. But the real victory came 2 weeks later when I was teaching my first class. I looked out at 30 pairs of eyes that now held respect and admiration again. Real this time. Earned through battle rather than given through assumption. And there, in the back row, sat a new student. Not Ethan. He'd been expelled and enrolled in a private school 2 states away. This was a quiet girl named Maya who'd heard about what happened and specifically requested my class. After the bell rang, she approached my desk nervously. Miss Meneses, I just wanted to say thank you for fighting back, for not giving up. My cousin was falsely accused of something at her school last year, and nobody believed her. She ended up dropping out because the bullying got so bad. But when she heard about your case, about how you proved your innocence, it gave her hope that maybe she could fight back too. And that's when I understood why surviving this nightmare mattered. Not just for me, but for every other teacher, student, and innocent person who'd ever been falsely accused. For everyone who'd ever been told their truth didn't matter because someone else had more power. For everyone who'd ever wanted to give up but needed to see that fighting back was possible.
I'm Claire Meneses.
I was destroyed by a lie, silenced by wealth, condemned by a system designed to protect the powerful. But I climbed back from hell and made sure the world saw exactly what the Blackwoods had done. They tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed. And seeds buried in darkness don't stay hidden.
They grow.
They break through concrete. They become something stronger than before. The girl who is almost erased is now the woman who teaches others to never let anyone silence their truth. And that's not just my victory. It's a lesson for anyone who's ever been told they're powerless. You're not. You never were. Power isn't about money or influence or control. Power is refusing to stay down when someone tries to destroy you. Power is fighting for truth even when it costs you everything. Power is becoming the person your enemies never believed you could be. The Blackwoods learned that lesson the hard way. And I'll spend the rest of my career teaching it to every student who walks through my classroom door. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. It's rising so high that the people who tried to bury you have to crane their necks just to see how far you've gone. Welcome to my resurrection. Class is in session.